Hi everyone, so I think it's time. Wow, that's the same phrase I used for the last video. So today I'm going to talk about my favorite and my one worst read of 2018. Yes, I know I'm late, but it's kind of pointless to even dwell on it, so we're just gonna go straight to it. So this is gonna be like top 3 from my least favorite of my tops of my favorites to my most favorite. My number 3 is Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer. I talked about this comparing it to Catch-22, but I didn't do a proper review for it. I thought that it was very interesting. At times it was kind of hard to continue reading it because it can maybe get monotonous and seem boring if you are used to like really fast-paced stuff, but I've gotten used to more slow-paced things and things that are more about like diary entry things and things that are more like character based. Like, again, this one has a very nice writing style that I admire a lot, and it just is very, it's kind of bitter, but it's also kind of witty, and it has a certain type of sense of humor that I did appreciate as something that I really haven't really had much experience with before. So it was something different from what I've read until this point, and I find it very, I mean, not especially entertaining, but it's kind of a look inside the mind of someone who feels, I guess, lonely, but I feel like that word doesn't really describe the complexity of the emotions that the narrator is capable of feeling. But that's what I'm gonna say for that one. Again, I do have a video in which I talk about it, which is the one with Catch-22. That one didn't get to be on this list because I like this one slightly better. My number 2 is a book that I actually, when I read it, I felt that it was very similar to Henry Miller's his style, and it is Choke by Chuck Palahniuk. I felt that, okay, this is a bit shorter than that one, and it is a bit more, like, more things happen in this book, I would say. But this also has that thing in which the main character kind of like goes from place to place, except that here he does have, you know, a particular place to be in. Usually, like, he belongs to different groups, so to speak. You know, he's like in different places, but it's usually the same places, whereas in Tropic of Cancer, the main character, who is also a narrator, he is kind of like wandering and going to place, trying to find a place to live. So in this one, something that I found also was very similar was the writing style itself. At times, not always, but sometimes it just really seemed like a sort of bitter, again, way to make fun of his life and how much of an asshole and often a loser the main character is, which the main character and narrator of Tropic of Cancer is also like a bit of an ass at times. But they both have, I mean, especially this character, at least he's more blunt about it. This book is very much about wanting to be loved, trying to find someone who will stay with you, or at least someone who you can benefit from, but also someone who is just generally caring about you constantly. My number 1 for 2018 is Ficciones by Jorge Luis Borges, and I read this in Spanish. It is my native language, so I very much enjoyed this book. This is a compilation of stories, an anthology of stories that basically are meant to bend reality in a way, and the premise of the stories is usually things that really do go beyond what we think is real, but they're also not physically completely impossible or magical. For the most part, they're just kind of things that one would assume that are not possible. But for example, there's this story about a guy. It's being narrated by an observer, someone who's kind of close to this guy, who could remember everything. So everything that ever happened to him, he could remember in full detail. Okay, but what I mean by that is, for example, he could recite a full text, even just having read it once. Like, he would remember it word for word, and the exact facial features of a person, and the name of someone that he was introduced to once but he never saw again, stuff like that, things that people don't really remember. And it was kind of a look into the way he lived his life because of that. And other stories are kind of commenting on the way we use language, or the ways that we can communicate knowledge and stuff like that. I think it's definitely worth this to read this, especially if you speak Spanish, but even if you don't, I'm sure there's great translations for this out there. And it's like really something that goes beyond what you would think is like mind-bending, I've talked about other books before that are supposed to be like surreal and mind-bending and quirky and stuff like that, and this is not quirky. This is very serious, I feel. I mean, it's kind of playful but serious, in the sense that it's taking itself seriously enough, but it's also not. It also wants to go outside the box. I mean, I know I'm like basically not saying anything at this point, but my point is that this book is amazing and I really would recommend it. So, like I said, my worst of 2018 is not really like the worst book ever. It's more of just a book that was the lowest rated out of the ones that I read this last year. It's just kind of like mediocre. I wrote a review on this, and I also made a review for this here on YouTube. It is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This is very popular, slightly less popular than The Hate You Give, I would say. I say that because I think that was the most popular book I read last year. But this one is also very popular, and I was actually expecting a lot from this, because it had a premise that I thought sounded interesting. I was like, well, this is about things like being from the suburbs and what flaws come with it, how people can be flawed and have issues, even if they try the hardest to live a perfect life or anything like that. Unfortunately, I didn't feel like this book really went very deep in that sense, or it explored much. I felt like the characters were very one-dimensional, and sometimes it just got preachy, in the sense that certain characters are obviously good and they're obviously the ones you're supposed to root for, and some are like obviously the ones that you're not supposed to like that much. And I don't like when that happens in books. I don't like being I don't like feeling that I'm being taught a lesson. I just want to read a story that has characters that are interesting and a plot and a story that I care about, and stuff like that. So, and also other things just were wrong with the book. You can watch that review. I go very in full detail about it, but the ending I thought was like really like ridiculous at some points, kind of out of place. Now I want to have an honorary mention for the top books of 2018, because this is a book that I started reading near the end of 2018, and I'm still not quite done with it, but I am very impressed with it even so, and I just want to mention it real quick because I do consider it a read of 2018. So, Beloved by Toni Morrison. It just has such a great writing style that does so much at once. I was thinking as I read this that even though whenever the narrator describes something, they're also like building character, and they're also explaining a bit of backstory. Like, so many things happen at once, but you can really grasp what's going on at that very moment, even if you don't fully understand you don't kind of understand the full picture of what is going on in the story, because things here are explained like little by little. But I like the fact that they're explained more with the feelings of the characters themselves than the narrator telling you exactly what happened. So I feel all the characters are just so realistic and fleshed out, and I like the way the the storyline is done in a non-chronological way. I think that's very flattering for this kind of book that goes a bit, it goes a bit darker and a bit more, maybe somewhat more magical at times, or a bit more, you know, eerie or inexplicable at times. And I really like how I don't know, it just seems like such a well thought out, really well planned out. I think this just might be a 5-star. Obviously I haven't finished it, but I just have a good feeling about this book, so more on that later, obviously. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and tell me about your favorite books of the last year, and what you think about these ones if you have read them, and we'll see each other in the next one. Bye!